A brand is trust. It's a customer trusting you with the experience and the feeling that they're going to get from consuming your product. And you can't really manufacture that feeling. You have to build it brick by brick by brick. Oftentimes, big companies don't realize how well a brand is doing until they're too large and too far along to compete. Because if you're doing $20 million, Coca-Cola probably doesn't even really know who you are, but you're slowly but surely building up a huge fan base of people that love and trust your brand. By the time that you get to being large and starting to take maybe 0.5% or 1% of their market share, it's too late. And these brands can instantly overnight release something into distribution and have it everywhere. But you can't manufacture the trust.
Being broke is bad, but being stupid is what's really bad. And what's really, really bad is being broke and stupid.
Confucius says that you have two lives, and the second one begins when you realize you only have one.
No one is paying attention.
It's not that hard, Scott. Tell him, Wash.
It's incredibly hard.
Hey, anything worth doing is.
Hello, wonderful people. Welcome into episode 4 of the Young, Smart, and Battling Broke podcast, where I talk with young people who inspire me by the brilliant ways they are building wealth and meaning. Today, I'm interviewing Alex Michaelsen, the CEO and co-founder of Leisure Hydration, a non-alcoholic beverage with a can so beautiful it is sure to catch your eye in the aisles of Erewhon and now Whole Foods. Alex is 26 and has been sprinting on making his entrepreneurial dream happen since quitting his first job at 22. Leisure has had fascinating growth strategies, from being stocked in major tech company fridges like Meta to building with a brand-first mentality. They recently launched nationally in Whole Foods, and in the show notes is a link so you can try it for free. Alex is incredibly sharp, bold, and honest. I left this recording with way too many notes and lessons. Alex made entrepreneurship much more tangible by diving into what his personal finance journey looked like, of having no income for 2 years. He explained how he has competed in the crowded and behemoth-filled beverage space with the likes of Coke and Pepsi, his honest view of what type of person should avoid entrepreneurship, and if he could shake his younger self, what he would tell him. Apologies for the occasional chair creak in the audio, trying my best to audio engineer this stuff out, but this episode was recorded virtually, so I failed once again to make the audio perfectly clean. But enough from me. I hope you enjoy learning from Alex as much as I did. Congratulations on the Whole Foods announcement. National distribution. That is freaking wonderful. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. Is that right? That was announced?
Yeah, it kicked off on March 3rd, and we've been rolling out ever since. And we're slowly rolling out. We're in about 400 plus of the 510-ish stores. So by the end of the month, we should be available in all of the Whole Foods across the country.
Wow. Can you just tell me about that day of basically partnership signature or whatever that looks like? Can you walk me through what kind of went into those weeks leading up to it, as well as just that day, that experience? Not that this is the ultimate end game or something of the sort, getting into Whole Foods, but ultimately it's a huge freaking deal for Leisure. So I would just love to hear those weeks leading up and that day itself, what it kind of felt for you, and what did the next day feel like as well?
Yeah, I mean, even to go back a little bit further, when we were ideating the brand, my brother and I, who we co-founded the business together, we would walk around the aisles of Whole Foods back in 2020, 2021 during COVID, when we were starting to think about what the brand and the business could be. So Whole Foods was always one of the big dreams and the goals for the brand, being kind of the premier national retailer for healthier, better for you, natural products. And ever since we launched, we've been trying to get into Whole Foods. So Whole Foods has a foraging team, which is basically trying to identify cool, local, emerging things that their customers would be interested in. And we were finding every which way to get connected with people, 3 years ago. And we had our ups and downs. We kind of hit some brick walls. We got really close in 2022, the year that we launched. Unfortunately, Amazon had acquired Whole Foods maybe a year or so prior, and that whole staff shuffle started to happen, and we lost all of our progress. Had some turnover on the employees at Whole Foods, and the following 18 months, we just made no progress. So we've been building our business in other stores and to try and build the case study of why we should be in Whole Foods. And coming last fall and around October of 2024, we were working with some partners that support our sales efforts, a broker, and the buyer, who's the decision maker over our category at Whole Foods. They stick to a very strict category review cycle. So every part of the store is its own category. So our space is like an enhanced water functional beverage. Most national retailers, you get one opportunity per year to pitch that retailer. And if you don't get in that time, you're waiting another 12 to 18 months to have another opportunity. Wow. So the other way in is called an off-cycle cut-in. So off of their review cycle, they can bring in items that they feel they are excited about. So we were pushing with the buyer and with our broker to see if there were any opportunities to come in off cycle, or else we wouldn't have a shot to get in until the end of 2025, early 2026. The buyer had responded 3 separate occasions that they would not be considering any off cycle. So we were a tad discouraged. And we got to the point where we were like, you know what, maybe we just create a really compelling pitch deck and we send it her way. We spent about 2 weeks building the most detailed, brilliant deck that we've ever made. And the day before we hit send on that email, the buyer and assistant buyer happened to reach out to us with an opportunity for an off-cycle cut-in review. This is right before Thanksgiving. We get on a call with them. The day before that call, we get an email that says we're conditionally approved for Whole Foods. Super exciting, but we had no idea what that means. Whole Foods has a whole compliance review. They need to make sure that your ingredients and nutrition meets their quality standards, as well as some legal and contract stuff that they have to work out. So after that call, it went really well and we still didn't know. And then it comes about 2 days before Christmas, we get an email saying that we're approved for a national launch at Whole Foods, which was, the best holiday Christmas gift you could ever possibly receive. So that was a really momentous time in the business, and we'd spent 3 years trying to get there. So we went into the holiday season really excited, and the launch was in March. So we had a couple short months to plan out everything that we were going to do to take that on, and that kind of initiated the entire process there.
Wow. How did you, in 2022, almost get into Whole Foods with the initial launch? So this was before you were in like Lazy Acres or Erewhon. You almost got straight into Whole Foods?
Yeah, so we were in a couple stores. Our first launch partner was Erewhon in LA, which is a super high-end, some would say bougie grocery store. At the time, they had 7 locations. Now they have 10. And we were doing well. We were hustling. We were making everything happen ourselves. Not really any budget in the business at that time. And Whole Foods, at least historically, is looking for local brands to support regionally. So for us, that would be in Southern California. So we had networked our way into touch with some of the foraging team and had actually met the national category manager / buyer at a trade show event the month that we launched. And we'd gotten all the way through the quality standards review. And right before that was supposed to get approved, everything changed with the staff turnover. So I think Whole Foods is often looking for opportunities for cool, innovative, differentiated products in different categories. So we were able to kind of make that pitch as a local brand, but unfortunately kind of hit a wall. And it took all that time to get the opportunity again.
Can we just talk more about like what the heck Leisure is? Can you sell me on this really quick? Can you explain why this product is differentiated? Because besides the most beautiful can on earth, I just am freaking in love with the branding. Like I would love to understand like why me as a consumer, I went to Lazy Acres earlier today and I picked this up and it was in like cute corner of a ton of other wonderful looking beverages. What is the selling point of Leisure? How do you guys try to differentiate?
Yeah, I guess I could also start with some background on myself and kind of how that all led into the positioning of the brand. But
that'd be great.
I'm Alex. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO. Started the business with my brother, and this all started during COVID. We were both Division I athletes in college, so I played football at UCLA. He was a track athlete at Wake Forest over in North Carolina. And our entire life, we drank Gatorade and Powerade to fuel physical performance on the field and in the weight room. But when we both left sports and moved to our everyday life, working corporate jobs, my brother was over at Nike as a a marketing manager leading the running division for North America. And after college, I joined a CPG sales brokerage firm, but I ended up actually starting a TikTok agency within that, which is a whole nother story we can get into. But the realization we had during COVID, when we had, quite frankly, too much time on our hands at home, was as athletes, we were constantly drinking these products to perform. At the time, we didn't realize how bad they were for you, filled with sugar and artificial ingredients and not really a lot of benefits. But what we had started to notice is that when we're sitting at the desk or on our feet and just living our everyday life, we were never drinking enough water. And all of ourselves and our friends, our peers were always dehydrated, complaining about it. But no one was getting a side cramp sitting at their desk all day. No one was having physical performance issues typing on a computer, or my brother being at a photo shoot all day. It was the feeling everyone's had in the afternoon. Maybe you've had the caffeine, you're not drinking enough water and minerals. And the dehydration actually affects your mind. So you get headaches, you get stressed, you struggle with fatigue, and you feel lethargic in the afternoon. You can't focus. You know, a majority of your brain is actually made up of water. So even when you're just 1% to 2% dehydrated, your cognition drops, your stress hormones go up, which means you just can't focus and your mood declines. So that was really the inspiration here. Was all of these brands were positioned for athletes and formulated for your body. And we saw the opportunity to create something that would be healthier and cleaner and lower calorie, lower sugar, but that would have benefits for both mind and body, targeting more of a working professional, younger creative that just wants to feel better mentally and physically all day long. So Leisure is a healthier hydration drink in a can. So we got rid of the single-use plastic, which is something deep in our values that we feel is important. But we wanted to create a brand that was relaxed and creative and fun versus talking about, you know, running a marathon or dunking a basketball. So we add in ingredients like magnesium, ashwagandha, and L-theanine that help reduce stress. They're good for your brain, good for focus, while having double the electrolytes of, say, a Gatorade, 10 different vitamins and nutrients, and really nothing artificial in the product. The way that we kind of think of our brand is that we're building Gen Z's vitamin water. So it's a low calorie, super refreshing, flavorful drink, but with the benefits that the next generation cares about.
I love that. And on that note of you guys ultimately realizing your customer archetype was this business professional type, the creative, the one that's working at their desk quite a bit. I did read online that you guys were being stocked in like Meta fridges and other big tech companies. I'm super curious, how did that entry point occur? Did you guys just basically brand really well and somebody working at Meta asked their procurement squad to make sure that they had Leisures in the fridge, or did you guys strategize that quite a bit?
Yeah, so as a brand that has limited resources and capital compared to the big players in the space that you all know, Gatorade, Body Armor, Powerade, Vitamin Water, I think our strategy has always been to win in hydration. You need to win with consumers that have never been spoken to by the category. So for us to try and compete in a massive retailer's sports drink aisle in a gym, you know, there's already so many established multi-billion-dollar brands competing there. So our strategy has always been to use distribution as a form of marketing. So putting the product in different points of a consumer's day that kind of interrupts their routine. So where are they at outside of the grocery store where you can build brand affinity, get awareness, get people to try and understand the product? We've always been trying to, what we call is flip the script on hydration. It's always been spoken to as something for sports performance. And what we're really trying to say is that hydration is something that everyone can be consuming to help them just feel better, perform better mentally and physically. So we wanted to show up in places that would kind of start to tell the story of that usage occasion. So we always wanted to be in corporate offices and creative agencies and sandwich shops and really play in areas where a sports drink really doesn't make sense. So in the beginning, we always knew that that was something we wanted to do, but we didn't quite understand how to approach that. So we started out in grocery. And then at the end of 2023, we'd gotten connected through some people to someone on the Meta Facebook team for their food and beverage program. And something that came up that we didn't realize is that corporate offices and a lot of people in that space are looking to hit ESG sustainability goals and get rid of plastic. So what we realized is a lot of these places need hydration, but everything in the category is plastic. So we have an opportunity not only to tell the story of, corporate workers and creatives want to stay hydrated to feel better during their work, but also we're helping those companies hit their goals by removing single-use plastic. So Meta banned single-use plastic from their offices on January 1st, 2024. We got connected to them in October, so it was perfect timing. And we started to roll out into Metas across the country in the beginning, the end of 2023, early 2024. And since then, we've expanded into basically every Meta office in the country. We're regionally in some Googles and LinkedIn's and Stripes, as well as in the travel space with the Chase Sapphire airport lounges. When you think about travel and leisure is kind of the perfect brand for that moment. And so that's kind of how we always thought about it, is how can we meet consumers where they already are with a product that's going to meet their needs in that moment, something to have in the middle of the day while you're working with a meal versus, as Gatorade would say, at the point of sweat. So they're always trying to be at a sports competition or at a gym or at a game. And really for us, just focusing on these opposite opportunities.
So in being a beverage and being a CPG, it seems like obviously you need actually, I won't say obviously, I don't fully understand the space and I really want you to illuminate the space, but for my assumption, you need crazy scale for you to be really making meaningful profits. And I'm curious, this B2B play, is that something that's profitable, or is it really more so through the marketing lens that you guys are operating out of there?
Yeah. So CPG in general is very capital intense. So you're going against brands that own the real estate, the shelf space, and consumers already know who they are. And you're trying to win the attention and trust of consumers, which is an extremely uphill battle. And since you're selling products, we retail for anywhere between $249 and $299 typically. So our margin in terms of dollars is very slim, and you need to sell, tens of millions of cans to truly get to scale and meaningful gross profit to fund the operations of the business. So I think the tricky part about this is every channel, every customer has a different profitability. Food service, which would be corporate offices and restaurants and venues, depending on the partner you're going with, can be extremely profitable or cannot be extremely profitable. So with something like a corporate office, typically it can be both profitable, but also amazing marketing. You're getting the product in people's hands, which with a food or a beverage, tasting is believing. So for us, we kind of view this distribution as marketing that makes money for us. We're getting the product in front of people's eyes. We're getting it in their mouth. And we don't have to spend any money on marketing to get the velocity, to get the sales. It's in a fridge with limited items, and there's no risk for the consumer to pick it up. If they don't like it, they throw it away. It's free. It doesn't even matter either way. Even in a restaurant or a cafe, maybe you have 5 or 6 options in the fridge. It's still a pretty low risk. They don't have an aisle of 1,000 different products to choose from. So the likelihood that they try your product is very high. So for us, offices have been profitable in the sense of the margin is higher because we don't need to hire any employees to manage it. We don't need to spend any marketing dollars to move the product. So it's a great way to kind of double down on both sales and on marketing.
To linger here and get a little bit more nerdy, because I genuinely am just so stunned by a startup beverage being in just my local Whole Foods. And it just seems like where the behemoths of Coke and Pepsi, I don't understand why they couldn't try to make a product like this and just maybe subtract an ingredient, assuming that there's some copywriting or some IP facet to this. Because to be frank, if I was trying to operate in this industry, I think I would just say it's too big. I have no chance as a youngin. So if you could walk me through one, how do you feel more personally? And two, I guess getting into the nitty gritty of the channels that leisure needed to operate in to be successful. So one channel I'm thinking about is the supply of ultimately all these Whole Foods or all these Erewhons having this product? Is that literally you driving there every day and dropping off the product? Or how I've heard with a lot of like Coke and Pepsi and why they're able to get such a control of the market is that they have a huge truck that has all the storage of all the different beverages that they're ultimately providing. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But like, I want to understand from a personal side how you dealt with the competition in the space, and the secondary side of like, is it that competitive? Is this something that somebody could build tomorrow in the CPG space? Like, how were you guys able to function?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, my thinking is that bigger markets are better because there's a larger addressable market to go compete in. And you can build something that is unique and speaks to a large enough niche that another competitor maybe isn't addressing. I think ultimately, the interesting thing about food and beverage typically is that there is nothing proprietary about the product you're creating, unless you have some sort of scientific breakthrough, which is often rare. The brands that win create brand, and they emotionally connect with the consumer that is buying their product. And the moat that you're really creating is around the brand and the benefits and the emotional connection that all comes together. And the problem with Coke and Pepsi and Keurig Dr. Pepper, the big strategics in the space, is that they're really good at what they do, which is manufacture, distribute, and market existing brands that already have consumer bases. They're not good at innovating. They're massive companies that have always done it the same way. And the incentives are not aligned internally to create innovation. Because if you're a middle management, brand manager at Coca-Cola, there's no incentive for you to be taking a risk to create a new brand that could potentially fail, because your only goal is to succeed and get promoted. And creating a new product in a large system is extremely risky. So oftentimes these big companies I've heard it from another entrepreneur in this space, is big companies basically subcontract innovation to emerging brands. And when they build a big enough consumer base and story in the market, they just acquire that business to play in that space. Because one of the most important parts about building a food and beverage company is building a brand. And what is a brand? A brand is trust. It's a customer trusting you with the experience and the feeling that they're going to get from consuming your product. And you can't really manufacture that feeling. You have to build it brick by brick by brick. And I think you look at some of the best brands in the world, like you think of, Red Bull really created this brand around this extreme feeling, extreme sports. And they built this emotional connection that created the energy category. And if you look at pulling, Red Bull's often one of the least liked flavor profiles in the energy drink space, yet it's the number one brand by a large margin because of the media and the brand that they've created. And you can't replicate that. Oftentimes, big companies don't realize how well a brand is doing until they're too large and too far along to compete. Because if you're doing $20 million, Coca-Cola probably doesn't even really know who you are. But you're slowly but surely building up a huge fan base of people that love and trust your brand. By the time that you get to being large and starting to take maybe 0.5% or 1% of their market share, it's too late. And these brands can instantly overnight release something into distribution and have it everywhere. But you can't manufacture the trust that a brand like ours or a further along brand has created over 5 to 10 years of chipping away at it. So that's kind of how I would think about that. In terms of the distribution, in the earliest days, we were driving around cases. I lived in a third floor apartment in LA, and we had thousands of cans and cases in my bedroom, and we didn't have a distributor at the time. So in order to get things to the local coffee shop or bagel shop or cafe, I would go in there and build the relationship and deliver it. Ultimately, that's not scalable. That's not what we know. It's not our core competency to distribute. So we do work with distributors across all channels. So we're typically working with a third party that's already with the retailer to distribute those products. Or in some cases, we go direct to a customer or direct to consumer on Amazon. There's one other part of that question if you wanted to bring something up there to expand on.
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered that pretty damn holistically. But I guess, did you, within your own just personal journey with this product, ever feel just overwhelmed by seeing your competitors? Did you I'm genuinely just trying to get to the personal facet, or were you able to just arrive at, oh, well, the TAM is great, so ultimately we can kick ass? I'm really curious. Did you not have any doubt, or you just have this radical self-belief?
And the entrepreneurial journey is filled with doubt and its peaks and valleys. And in the earliest days, I mean, when we started working on this company, I was like 21 years old. When we launched, I was 22, 23, and I hadn't developed as much maturity as maybe I have today. So I think you look at a lot of the successful brands, big multinational brands, other startups that are in a similar space, and you kind of are always watching what's happening, and you can kind of overwhelm yourself with all the noise in the world that's happening around you. But I think what I've learned is that you have to tune out the noise, because ultimately other brands don't matter. It's about building something for the customer. And we don't think a ton about competitors in our space, because we feel like we're building a different product and a different brand for a different consumer. And we're just focused on providing the best experience to those people in the space. I think you do have to be aware of what's going on in the market. You need to understand the dynamics of the category you're playing in so that you can position yourself appropriately. But we're just trying to build the best possible business and provide the best experience for our customers that we want to win with.
I love that. Can we linger on this entrepreneurial fire though that you do have, and kind of where that started? Can I get to know Alex a little better? And can you share with me where this all came from? Why 21-year-old was just ready to lace them up and push on this? Because it's not where most 21-year-olds' headspaces are, obviously. So would love to understand what's your ultimate motivation, brother? And also kind of, I guess, if there was a light bulb moment or a really special like reason why this space. I mean, I know you talked about the athlete facet with you and your brother, but you guys choosing this to be where you guys were going to sprint, because I'm assuming you have a broader entrepreneurial frame. And if you weren't doing this, you'd probably be doing something else entrepreneurial. So when was the moment that you guys were like, this is the sprint? And I want to also get to know the why behind you being entrepreneurial in the first place.
Yeah, I think ultimately, even when I was a little kid, there were two things that were always true. I'm extremely competitive and extremely curious. And I think those two things make for a more entrepreneurial mindset. Ever since I was a little kid, I was always trying to find ways to sell things or make money. I mean, obviously, like the childhood lemonade stand. I remember vividly being on a vacation into the mountains where everyone's snowboarding. And when we were at the hotel, instead of playing games or relaxing, I remember going to the manager and being like, can I help you count all the coins? Like there was a pile of coins. I'm like, can I count these coins, like organize them for you and like figure out how much is here? And just having that curiosity. I think I've always had that kind of competitive drive, and I've always, maybe it's kind of like a not going along with authority, maybe had a little to do with it, of like, I don't like to follow all the rules. I like to do my own thing. I like to determine my own path. And I think I also really like to have control over the ideas and the strategy and the direction of things. I like to come up with what's going to happen, and I like to direct it. I remember in college, even in the fraternity house, I would find things that people want and try to build some sort of business around it. So I remember I bought a blender in college when we lived in the house, and I would make smoothies for people and deliver it to their rooms in the morning. And I would sell it to them for cheaper than they could get it at the school cafeteria at the smoothie shop in town, and provide that service and sell that type of thing. And just always trying to find different creative ways where I can do something on my own. Part of what drove kind of this is, I think, being an athlete, it makes for a great mindset to start your own thing, because as an athlete, you're always kind of working towards a common mission And it is kind of the unusual path. I think as an athlete, especially in college, you sacrifice a lot of your personal and social time to pursue something. And I was a long snapper in college, which is a specialty position. So in high school, I kind of had discovered that I was good at this, which was an unusual path. And, and a lot of times instead of hanging out with friends on the weekends and after school, I was practicing my craft, trying to go kind of on my own way. And I kind of always liked taking my own path. And I think it motivates me to be able to do something other than what everyone else is doing. It's less about doing stuff that everyone else isn't, and more so of going where I'm curious and what makes me excited. A mentor of mine a long time ago said to pay attention to what you pay attention to. And it really stuck with me, especially for people that maybe want to start a business or do something that isn't, a 9-to-5, but don't quite know what it is to just pay close attention to what you are naturally paying attention to. And that'll direct you in the way of things that you're interested in or you're passionate about. And I think having that burning sense of curiosity will lead you towards asking questions. I, as a kid, annoyed a lot of people in my family of always having to know why. I hate not knowing the answer to things. So that drives me to be like, why is this done this way? And why can't it be done better or in this way that I would prefer it? So, I mean, my family can tell the stories of all the Shark Tank concepts and ideas that I've had during COVID and as a kid, and constantly pitching these ideas, many of which sucked. But I think that is a good thing, to be constantly thinking about how to make things better, whether you're a normal employee or starting your own business, is always thinking of how can I come up with ideas to improve the way things are currently being done. I wasn't a great student. I wasn't a bad student, but I think the issue was I was never very interested in school. I didn't like the structure. I didn't like having to spend so much time on things that didn't drive me. And I think that's kind of a common thread between a lot of entrepreneurs, is a lot of them weren't the best students. And I think for example, I can't read a book in a class. I just can't get myself to do it. But if there's a book about business or about our industry or about something, I can read it all day long and can focus on that. So I think, again, paying attention to what you pay attention to and letting your curiosity kind of lead you down a path is what kind of put me in this direction. I think starting a company when you're young seems risky to people because it's different and you're not taking, the ladder path of climbing in a corporation or getting promoted. But to me, I always had this philosophy that it's riskier not to do it. If I got old and never took the chance to do something I thought I could do well at, or that I could build something interesting in, I would regret it. And as a young person, it can feel scary to try and do something on your own, especially the fear of failure in public. But it's riskier not to take that chance, especially when you're young. Your bills are low. You're not married. You don't have kids. You have limited responsibilities. The second you're, 35 with kids and a mortgage and a wife and all that, it becomes a lot more risky because you have so much on the line. So I think when you're young, like, you can sacrifice time, you can sacrifice a lot of things, and you have the energy to do so. So I think it's almost the best time to explore these kinds of things because you have so much time to build up whatever your career will be. And you hear about so many of these authors and actors and entrepreneurs who failed and failed and failed. And then when they're 55, they become this person that everyone knows or built something so successful. And it comes from that repetition. So that I don't even really think about failure, because I just think when you fail, you learn. And another quote from a past coach was that the two things in life that you can control are your attitude and your effort. Those are the only two things you can control. And if you fail or something bad happens, you can control your attitude and your effort. You stay positive and you work hard and you take those learnings and you apply them and you figure out what went wrong and how can I be better. So you can truly never fail as long as you are keeping a positive attitude and continuing to put your effort towards learning and improving.
Beautifully put, man. Really beautifully put. On the failures as lessons thing, can we talk about if you have a favorite failure? Seeing that you do deem failures as something that's just critical to the journey, is there one that really resonates with you over the last couple of years as delivering a meaningful education?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first failures we had in our business was our very first production run of the product. We were there in Las Vegas and we didn't have a ton of money, so there wasn't a ton of room for errors. And our very first production run went south almost immediately, where our mango flavor, which it's currently called tropical mango, but at the time was mango ginger. And we were tasting the batch. And when you have a non-carbonated beverage, you have to put nitrogen in to fill the extra space that carbonation usually does so that the can isn't soft. So it feels firm and it has structure to it. Oh, and I remember tasting the samples that came out of the batch. And I remember being like, this tastes fizzy. This doesn't taste like it tastes like there's bubbles in it. And we were working with a partner that maybe wasn't the best. And they were like, assured me, no, it's just the nitrogen. It's just the nitrogen. It'll go away. I didn't know enough to be able to fight back against that. And they produced the entire production run, which at that time was huge. It was about, 48,000 cans total, 16,000 per flavor. And that mango batch, all 16,000 cans came out carbonated. There's an issue with the production line where they did not turn off the carburetor that puts in the carbonation into the beverage. So we now had 3 flavors at the time, a citrus, a blueberry lavender, and a mango ginger. And 2 of the 3 were non-carbonated. 1 was carbonated, and right on the packaging, it says non-carbonated, no bubbles. So now we're sitting there with 16,000 cans of a flavor that's carbonated that we're marketing as non-carbonated. We ended up leaning into the ginger. Ginger has a spice that kind of feels like carbonation. And we were like, we have no other option but to sell this product because we don't have the money to throw this away. So for the first 5 months of the business, we were selling one of our flavors as carbonated. I think the biggest learning there was when you're getting into an industry that you don't know, you need to learn every intricate detail of the business and of the process so that you have the capabilities to go into an environment and check people when they maybe aren't doing stuff wrong and to really understand what goes into the end to end of running the business. So that was one of those key learnings that just kind of kicked in that curiosity in myself of like, I need to make sure I know exactly how this works and what's going on so that this never happens again. And from that production run on, I was there, but I haven't missed a production run since. So I'm there anytime that we're producing product. We're now in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I'm there every couple months. I taste every single batch that's ever produced because I know that I know what's going on. I know how it should be, and I need to be there to make sure. And I think that's kind of gone through the entire business now. And making sure that I understand every area so that I can, mitigate risk and mistakes. But also I think it's important as a founder in the early days, our philosophy was, it was just my brother and I, we had no employees. Our philosophy for the first 2 years was we need to do every aspect of this business ourselves so that when we do build a team, we understand what each role entails, what the challenges are, what the goals are so that we can lead with clear direction, but most importantly, empathy. No one wants to have a coach that's never done the thing they're coaching or a teacher that's never worked in the field. It feels wrong. So when now we have a salesperson or operations person or marketing person, we've done the job that they're doing and we know the challenges that they're facing, have empathy in what they're going through and lead them with clearer direction.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. If you could shake younger Alex, if there's something that young you didn't realize or didn't think or a philosophy, it's clear that you are very philosophical, Alex. So I'm curious though, if there's a younger you that you wish knew something sooner and you wish you could kind of shake him and just be like, dude, this is how this works. Or it can be content based, but I'm assuming it's probably going to be more broad and philosophical. But if there's something that you wish you kind of just knew sooner, I'd love to hear it.
Don't let others' opinions get in the way of pursuing ideas, passion, dreams. Especially when you're younger, starts in middle school, hormones change. There's a lot of insecurity, social pressures, social groups. I think at least where I was growing up, I felt like there was a lot of pressure to fall in line and kind of dress the way and act the way and do the things that everyone's doing. And it kind of disincentivizes being interesting and unique and to try different things. But I wish when I was younger, I knew that none of that mattered, because the act of doing is the single most impactful way to learn and grow personally and professionally. So the fear, the social pressure of, well, people won't think I'm cool because I'm doing this different thing. It hinders your growth because you don't try and do those things. And that fear of failure, you have to get over, because again, the failure is just a learning that will help you build your tool set even stronger when you go and do your next thing. So I wish when I was younger, I tried to do more interesting, unique things, because ultimately, you can't learn this in a class. Life is not a classroom. Life is not a case study. The variables aren't controlled. Like things happen every day. Like you can't control when you're doing a business school case study. It doesn't have in that case study the fact that your bank account is negative and maybe you're in a rough patch with a relationship, or the truck delivering the purchase order to the retailer goes through bad weather and tips over and all of the product gets destroyed. Then what happens? So the act of doing is how you learn from all of the speed bumps and roadblocks that you hit, getting slapped across the face and figuring out how to quickly pivot.
Speaking on the social pressures and understanding that when most people graduate college, the ultimate social pressure is to have an income, is to have a job. What's been the personal finance journey essentially to where you stand now? Because I think for a lot of people, it's really intangible or hard to understand entrepreneurship, because you just need to pay bills, right? And I think a lot of people will create that argument though too intensely, where they don't really realize that if they actually just cut down their means of living, they can afford a lot more, and you don't actually need whatever salary you think you need right now. But I'd love to hear your journey to make this just a little bit more tangible for the typical person.
Yeah. So I finished credits 1 quarter early. So I started working in the last quarter of college. So for the first 9 months post-graduation, I did have a full-time job. At the same time, I was working on getting the business started with my brother, all the foundational stuff. So I had a full-time income. It was a good job. When it came to be a month before producing our first can, I put in my 2 weeks and I quit the job. And at that point, to me, it was, again, one of those things of, if we fail, we'll figure it out. Like you almost have to have like some sort of naivete and like blind optimism to be able to go into this type of thing. So from there on out, quit the job. I basically, that time I had a certain amount of money. I sold all of my stocks and crypto that I had. It wasn't very much as a young person, but I had made a couple crypto things in college work and a couple stock things work, but very little. Basically the plan was I'm going to use the money in the bank account and what I sold from minor investments to live off of, pay for rent, gas, food, etc. And then I would figure it out. Didn't really have a huge plan, but I had the confidence that whatever happens, I'm going to figure out a way out, because there is no alternative. So for the first, 6 or so months, I drained all of my money from my accounts out to pay for basic bills. And we weren't a large enough company or hadn't raised enough money to even pay ourselves anything. So after 6 months, it kind of just started getting to a point where you're just swiping a credit card and accruing debt, which is a very common theme amongst entrepreneurs, especially ones who haven't built up wealth prior to getting into the journey, which was pretty intense. You're right out of college and now you're accruing debt, which is a terrible way to live, seeing the APR continuing to hit your credit card account. After a certain amount of time, I started to use the business to subsidize some stuff. Like, I'm using all this gas to drive for the companies, so starting to subsidize some of the rent and some of the gas. But honestly, for 2 years, there was not a single dollar of income in terms of salary coming out of the business into my pocket. So that starts to affect every part of your life. I remember multiple times having to ask my roommate / friend to Zelle me money to pay for the rent, and then I'd pay him back in a couple of days when I had something come in, which is a very vulnerable position to be put in. And, for 2 years straight, it's just debt consistently piling up over time. And that leaks into every part of your life. I think, especially when you go to UCLA and a lot of your friends go into career paths that can honestly be pretty lucrative right off the bat, consulting, banking, finance, whatever it might be. So as someone who in the beginning is having to work 7 days a week, getting into stores and sampling the product and making no money, but also not having the time or resources to do anything social. So you see your buddies going on a trip or going to a restaurant. I remember many times going to birthday dinners where I would eat prior to the dinner so that I didn't have to get food, but I could still be there with the friends at the dinner. And that just creates an entire level of insecurity in a weird way of not being able to participate in things with people you have always participated with because you don't have the means to do so. And then secondarily, I think not having the time. So, you're seeing, I remember many times in the first year and a half, 2 years of being like, what am I doing here? I'm not making any money. This is so hard. All my friends are enjoying their life, going to this place on a Saturday or going on this snowboarding trip or going to the beach. You're like, I can't do any of this. Am I making the wrong mistake to not enjoy my life? And then I think secondarily, having a serious relationship at the time and still, not being able to do the simple things like buy a coffee or buy flowers for your girlfriend wears on the relationship over time. And I think it's hard for anyone who's not an entrepreneur to understand the pressure of feeling that an entrepreneur is going through. So it's challenging to communicate that to your girlfriend or boyfriend or friend of what's happening because they simply don't understand it. So you're kind of in a place where you are acting different and you can't really explain what it is because they don't understand it. So for those 2 years, I mean, it wore on me. It was really, really exhausting, not, going to Chipotle and asking for triple rice and beans because those are free and buying tortillas at the store to turn one bowl into 4 meals so that you can make that $10 last, almost the whole week is just a different experience. After 2 years, we were able to grow the business a bit. We raised a little bit of money. We were able to pay ourselves our first salary. Actually, it was just over a year ago. January 1st of 2024 was our first pay period on salary. But again, significantly lower than where I was at my entry-level job. Maybe a little bit above minimum wage for the amount of hours that I was working. So even then I was able to start to pay some general bills and feel a little less pressure. But still no real flexibility. Every purchase, you're thinking about the purchase. Over time, as we've raised money and we've grown the business, last year we grew 4.5x. We were able to give ourselves another raise and then recently our third raise, where I'd say a couple months ago was the very first time I remember making a purchase, like buying a Chipotle bowl or something similar and walking out being like, holy shit, I didn't think about it. I didn't think about anything when I bought this one thing, not even a fancy thing, just a meal. And it took 3 years to get there, but it feels like in some way it paid off. Obviously, we're still so early in the journey, but that's something that I would say for people that want to become entrepreneurs is doing a check on yourself of, is this what I truly want for my life? Because the sacrifice you'll be forced to make is dramatic and changes your lifestyle entirely. So if you're not okay missing out on social things, going on a trip, being with friends, being able to buy a grocery you want or a meal that you want, and constantly being stressed over a list that never ends of things that need to be done, then maybe it's not the right fit, and that's totally fine. But I think for me, I'm in a funny way a masochist in that I like the pressure and I like the feeling of pain of like, I have to figure this out. I think it has a lot to do with sports and training. I think it's like you have to overcome the things. And I think the pressure helps me be focused. So it's something that I enjoy and have learned to enjoy, but I don't think it's for everyone. But it certainly can pay off in the long run if it's something that you can handle or want to handle.
And for my own like understanding, like, because I consider entrepreneurship quite a lot, and understanding where you were in terms of joy during those periods would be really interesting for me, because I do find extreme satisfaction with labor I have equity within. And any just productive assignment can feel satisfying. Just being focused can feel satisfying. But there's this whole nother level to seeing the instrumental value of what you did for yourself. And during those periods of financial instability, how would you try? It's really hard to compare it and contrast it, but I mean, you did work a normal job. So you did have some experience of what it feels like to work on projects that aren't yours. I'm curious, from like a joy component, essentially, how would you compare and contrast how you felt living in that financially unstable, but I have equity in my labor time, and that's where most of your time is, versus working your other job? And understanding where you are now, kind of wrapping up this question, has the joy been greater because you feel financially stable, or do you just love, like, are you a true masochist and do you kind of miss that stress? But really more so curious on that former of that question of understanding how the equity in your labor can compensate potentially for the financial insecurity, and maybe it doesn't, but I'd love to understand for you how that felt.
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is that entrepreneurship isn't fun, it's fulfilling. There are certain moments where it's fun, but in general, it sucks in a certain way, but it is extraordinarily fulfilling to have ownership over what you're doing and to fully own the strategy and direction of something and to accomplish things. The feeling of setting a goal in a direction in the strategy and getting a win, whether that be us getting into our first ever store or to getting into Whole Foods or to being a top seller at X, Y, or Z, that feeling of achievement when you have 100% ownership and really starting a company, you're creating something out of thin air. It did not exist yesterday and now it exists today. And the feeling of achieving things is extraordinarily fulfilling. There are moments of fun, but it's not a joyful experience starting a company holistically. What I would say was, in my role in my past company, I was brought in part-time in college to help create this TikTok agency, which was, the CEO of the sales brokerage was, if you can sign a couple clients, we'll start a company and you'll lead it. And we signed a couple clients. By the time I graduated and walked across the stage with the diploma, I got promoted to lead that agency. So here I am, 22, freshly out of college, just out of a fraternity, having no clue how the world works or how anything works. And I'm basically starting this company from scratch within a company. And over the preceding 9 months, hired and fired, double-digit people, managing clients, some of which had market caps over $1 billion, being 22, but acting like you're 35 and having to figure out, how do I manage client expectations? How do I hire people? How do I fire people? How do I even do any of this? Which getting thrown into the fire certainly helped push me in this direction. We had a ton of success. We went in 9 months from 0 to over a 2 million run rate. Run rate being, 3-month revenue average times 12. And by the time I left, we were approaching a 3 million when I was part-time at the very end. That was extremely gratifying and stressful. And it was a good feeling of accomplishment, especially being 22 and not knowing anything. But at the same time, the level of fulfillment that comes from owning the end to end of something and being responsible for the upside and the downside, for being there from when it was literally nothing and creating the idea and the strategy and learning and pivoting and iterating what you're doing, and to see that come to life is the most fulfilling thing I think you can do. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we've been so proud to see was when we started, we had a slightly different packaging and far different flavor profiles. And through hundreds of, honestly, thousands of hours of sampling to people, we've made 7 to 8 different micro iterations, micro pivots that have updated the flavor profiles, nutritionals, the branding. And I remember collecting kind of this qualitative data, being like, I think that we need to make this change. I think we need to make the flavor more this way based on hundreds of people's feedback. And I think that we need to make the packaging look this way. And I remember, I'm no designer. I cannot design anything, but I can conceptualize in my brain what something needs to look like and then work with someone who is capable of doing the design. And I remember leading the project to iterate our packaging from version 1 to version 2. And once we executed that and put it into market, I remember after a couple months getting a few emails, calls, and then bumping into some store managers in person and them saying, I don't know what you guys did to the product, but ever since this new branding came in, it's been selling way faster. And I remember that being like the first moment of extreme fulfillment of being like, we spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours learning, derived the insight, made the change, put it into the world, and to see the effect of that was extreme fulfillment because we had ownership over the full process. I think you can reach fulfillment in so many other ways, not entrepreneurship wise, but I think the feeling of owning something entirely because you are responsible for the upside and the downside leads to so much more fulfillment because you know that the majority of that benefit was coming from something that you learned and something that you implemented.
And building with someone that's so meaningful to you too. I can't imagine that there's anything more meaningful or fulfilling than your partner being someone. Whenever they succeed, it probably feels just like your own success, in that you've been working with Steve, your older brother, since the beginning of Leisure. Can you talk to me a little bit about just having a business partner that probably acts a little bit like a second brain? And maybe you guys have stark contrast. And if you do, I'd love you to illuminate that and how you guys maybe complement each other's. Because how just having a business partner kind of built in, how has that evolved within this journey? Has that been challenging to have someone you love so much, but you also have to like be really tactical and very professional with at certain modes or certain moments? Could you talk a little bit about your relationship with Steve and how that's evolved or how that's been special in the continuous evolution of Leisure?
Yeah, I think I'd start by saying that every business partnership, regardless of who you start it with, is going to be challenging. It's kind of like a professional marriage in a sense. And a lot of business partnerships fail because of that and differences in opinions. And I think it's similar to marriages. Like, why do things fail? It's typically communication, different values, different ideas, etc. But I think what's different about working with family member or loved one, whatever it might be, is that the bond and connection and trust goes much deeper than the relationship as being a business partner. It's the blood that you share and the years of experience you have together as siblings prior. But I think there also comes an entirely different dynamic of he's an older brother, 5 years older, and it's kind of, I'm the CEO. So it's kind of in the beginning was a weird dynamic of he's the older brother with more experience, but it just can kind of, you can butt heads a little bit over direction of things. I think that happens in every partnership. And I think we've had the ups and downs of having to work through some of that stuff. But ultimately, I think you come back to like, you're always going to be their brother and you're always going to share the blood. So I think you just have to figure out a way to continue to improve communication over time. I think it was much worse in the beginning and it's slowly gotten better, but the upside I think is super strong. And I think that's why there are like a lot of good businesses founded by siblings or dads with their sons or whatever it might be. We both come from brand marketing type backgrounds. Obviously I had one internship and then one job that was kind of in that space. He built his entire career at Nike in marketing. But I think our natural skill sets and proclivities, if that's the right word, are differentiated. So he's our CMO. So he leads all marketing, brand, partnerships, and online, Amazon, website, social media, brand partnerships, etc. Where I more so lean into operations, sales, finance, and support on the marketing where I can. I'm more naturally put in the direction of numbers and ideas around how to operate things. I'm a much more natural numbers guy, and he's much more of a natural creative leaning person. So we kind of lean into our strengths. Like I obsess over margin and numbers and cost of goods sold and how can we get this thing to point A to point B more efficiently. Whereas like that is something where his skill set is not aligned to, but he comes up with really creative ways to tell stories and to build partnerships and super talented at building long-standing relationships with people where he's earned trust with a lot of people in his career that we can come back to build partnerships with. The Chase Sapphire lounges came initially from a connection he had built at Nike and had grown over time, and someone with a company and his company got acquired and was at Chase now. And then all of these things come together. So he's kind of a rainmaker of sorts in terms of pulling together these relationships that can turn into partnerships. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question entirely, but happy to go deeper on any of those as you see fit.
I love that answer. If I could just, again, selfishly for myself, tactically, is there any advice you'd give to young entrepreneurs in trying to find partners?
Yeah, I think it's important to find people that have the same like vision and values as you. I think it would be smart to find people that you have experience with, or at least testing out before doing it, of how do we work together? What is your communication style? How can we better partner together? I think I would venture to say that the number one cause of stress in any relationship is communication. So like understanding how people think and how they like to get things done and kind of building your process around that, which is, I'm not perfect at, and we're always trying to figure out how to be better. One thing that I've learned is getting everything aligned prior, handling the divorce before the marriage, which is kind of a weird way to look at things, but with any partnership is like handle the paperwork in the agreement first. Like even when it's like that quote actually came from a distributor of ours where we have an exclusive distribution contract. And it was 3 months of heavy, intense negotiations multiple hours on Zoom, compromising on different things and pushing for different things. And he's like, I know that this process sucks, but we need to handle the divorce before the marriage so that we don't have to think about this ever again. So I think with the business partners, like, what are we each going to do? What are we good at? How do we communicate? And what are the rules of the engagement? Having the operating agreement, having the plan of what happens if things go wrong, and having that all tucked away so that it's settled and on paper and it's objective truth. Don't leave anything up to chance. The last thing you want is for things to go wrong and then there to be a debate of what happens then.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I love that. Wrapping this up, man, I really, really, really enjoyed this chat. And I just have one more question, which I've been asking to all guests. And that is, what is the ultimate scarce resource, Alex?
Yeah, I think I have two responses to that kind of go into our business. But in terms of myself, our team, the ultimate scarce resource, and I think that this is the number one for anyone, it's just time. There is a set amount of hours in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, and you can only do so much in that time. And kind of our philosophy in running the business is effort in, revenue out. How do you focus your time on the things that will drive value into the business? The little things are important, but making sure that the 80-20 rule, Pareto, like, we try to make sure that 80% of our time is going into 20% of the business and the things that truly drive the value. 20% of your distribution, of your partnerships, are going to drive the 80% of the value or the volume or the revenue that you grow. So I think everything that we as a startup, we just hired our first employee last May, our second employee in January, and we're about to have our third employee soon. So we're soon to be a team of 5, which is still small. And there's 1,000,001 things we can do. But I think always evaluating the 15 to 20 or whatever it is ongoing tasks, figuring out what is the most important use of this time to deliver value to the business. And I think that's kind of evolving to become more of my role, is identifying where do we strategically need to place our time, because you can spin in circles trying to do every little thing every day, but ultimately there's only so much time. So focusing on what's going to deliver value over long periods of time. And I think specifically to our business and this industry, the most scarce resource for us with consumers is attention. So there are 40,000 items in a store, and we're one of them. There's so much noise in media, advertising, social media, the state of the world, etc. How do we earn the attention of a consumer to care about who we are? And I think now with the rise of social media, like, attention is the ultimate. It's like attention and data is like the new oil. It's the most valuable thing that you can have. And that's why this whole world of content creators and content in general is becoming so valuable, is that it's always been that the attention of humans is the most valuable resource, and it's worth so much money. And that's why a Super Bowl ad costs so much money, because you're getting 30 seconds of somewhat undivided attention from tens of millions of people across the country and world. So that's something that we're always trying to optimize for and find opportunities to arbitrage, is like, how do we earn the attention of people that you're trying to communicate to? So I would say that that's definitely the most scarce resource. I mean, ultimately, similar to time, there's only so many things a person can pay attention to. So how do you create something interesting and meaningful and valuable to someone so that they're willing to invest their attention into your thing? So when you're starting to think about your product or your marketing or your strategy, if I'm scrolling on a TikTok or Instagram feed and it's a boring thing that tells no story, why am I spending my time looking at this thing? So I think that even kind of raises the point of how important it is to build something that is interesting and valuable, and kind of speaks to why brand is so important, is that brand is building trust in your thing, in your message, in your story, in your product. And you ultimately build that by winning attention, by creating something valuable and interesting that people are willing to put their time and money and attention into. And I think that's why you see, Red Bull is a great example of this, is that they're not really a beverage company. They're a media company that monetizes through the sale of cans, not ads. And they use media to create attention, to generate attention, to then sell a lifestyle and a feeling that then is sold through the product. I mean, most recently, I think maybe the best marketing startup of all time in beverage, Liquid Death, not speaking about their business specifically, but the marketing genius of that brand was to focus on entertainment, because entertainment drives attention. Someone putting a post of a picture of a can on an Instagram feed doesn't really earn attention from people. What people really want are stories that they relate to and resonate to or find funny. And I think that's why podcasts have become so huge, is that it's entertaining or it's valuable. And I think those are the two things that I think are driving businesses today. Is, are you entertaining or are you providing value? The ultimate one is what I call edutainment, is like, how do you educate and entertain at the same time? But yeah, I know that was a long-winded response, but that's kind of how I would think of the scarce resources.
Alex, thank you so much for chatting with me for this hour. Genuinely beyond grateful. Learned so much, and just deep respect for all you're doing, man. It's really, really cool.
Appreciate it. And it's cool to come full circle from knowing you and back in the day in college and getting on and talking. And as you grow the podcast, I'm happy to come back on and dive into any more parts of the business, and when we're further along in the future. If anyone wants to find us, you can find us on Instagram, leisureproject.co, same handle as the website, or on Amazon. And we just launched at Whole Foods nationwide, and I'll send Cole a discount code that will give you a free can rebate at any store that we're in. So if you go to a Whole Foods or any store that we're in near you, you can redeem it, submit your receipt, and get a free can to try it out yourself.
Hell yeah. That'll be in the show notes. Hell yeah. Love it, Alex. That's wonderful, man. If you made it to this outro, thank you so much for listening. Genuinely trying my best to get better at this and make it as educational and entertaining for you. So please let me know how I can improve. I freaking love feedback. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, at Cole Hume. And I intend to post way more on my Substack, so if you're the cultivated type and like to read a little, be sure to check out Young, Smart, and Battling Broke there. Until next time, smile at strangers and trust your curiosity. Thank you for listening.